Forget cable, switch to Frontier. The Fios Triple Play brings dedicated 100% fiber optics to your home. Fios TV, 15x5 internet and digital phone for $108.50 per month with 2-year price protection plan on qualifying service. FrontierPacificNW.com.
I made him laugh a little bit.
Puff, give.
You laughed a little bit on that one too, Rockstar Bob, as I was passing Leroy Hill the blunt. All right, we got the bad news on our show yesterday that Leroy Hill, who we had on the Huddle a couple times, and it was
Our
great.
show today.
Yeah, our show today. But I was referring to Leroy Hill. We had him on the Huddle a couple times this year as well, and he was great.
Just let it go, Bob.
What's the problem? What's the problem here? We're on the tape. What's the problem? Let's figure this out together.
No, you just said we had him on the show yesterday.
We talked about on the show yesterday was Leroy Hill getting in trouble, and then I was going to say we've had him on the show in the past during the Huddle this year, and it's too bad because he seemed like he's a good guy. He talked openly about the problems that he'd gotten over them. Now look, these aren't big problems except for the lack of judgment in it. Leroy Hill got busted for.
Let's pause for a minute.
Okay.
The domestic abuse.
Different story.
Not in support of that.
100%
is a big
different
problem
story.
if that were that was one of the 3 in 3 years we've done.
Fair enough, and I take that back. The drug ones are the ones we're kind of on, and the one that happened on the show that we talked about yesterday, or Monday, depending on when you're looking at this, is what we're talking about now. And it was where if Leroy Hill, basically, if he'd been in the state of Washington, this had happened, he would have gotten a parking ticket.
If that.
If that, because he was found with less than an ounce of pot. A neighbor turned him in. In Atlanta, you get arrested for it, you go to jail, you get booked for it, then you get sent home afterwards. Here, it may not be such a big deal, and regardless of what you're viewing, Bob's and I are pretty liberal on this sort of stuff. I think what gets me about this story and concerns me about this story is just the lack of judgment that Leroy Hill showed here. Rather than judging what he did, it's more about why he did it.
Yeah, and it's, again, I don't know if there was a history between himself and the neighbor who called, because they said police were called because of a strong aroma of marijuana. They brought drug-sniffing dogs into the building.
For pot.
And it turns out, according to the story, it said marijuana residue and a burnt, how did they term?
Blunt.
Blunt in the ashtray. So I'm feeling like there was an agenda. But that's beside the point. You already had 2 strikes in 2 years. You're a free agent. This is where you're going to cash in. You got to forego some of this stuff until you really are done with your career. You know, this isn't about how we feel about marijuana. Should it be legal?
No.
Should it be viewed as more damaging than alcohol? Blah blah blah. The reality is it's illegal, especially where you live in Atlanta.
It was a bad decision, man. And
It's a
the
poor
situation
choice.
you
And
were in.
if you're a GM, he's a free agent. If you're a GM who was interested in him, now you're looking at a guy who might be facing a 4-game suspension.
Almost certainly, yeah.
And also looking at a guy who 3 times in 3 years has been in trouble off the field. So you're now going, all right, do I even want to mess with this? I'm not going to have him for the first 4 games, potentially. And he's clearly a guy who's not learning a lesson, whether you think it should or should not be against the rules. If I'm a GM that doesn't have experience with this guy, I'm going, forget it. Give me somebody who can start the year and give me somebody who I don't have to worry about what's happening off the field.
Seahawks standpoint, the guy was 4th in tackles last year. Played all 16 games, had 89 tackles, had 4 sacks. Whether or not they're going to re-sign him or not, we don't know. I think if they weren't going to re-sign him, well, this makes it very easy. They're not going to. But even if they do, I mean, you still got to have an answer for those first 4 games. So Leroy Hill at age 29 may have administered the death blow to his own career.
Just a bad choice, man.